Hello, everybody. I'm here today with Pricilla Stone, who's the host of the Quantum Wytch Cafe, an experiencer and a good friend. She is here today to share about her encounters with UAPs in order to provide information for the UAP Medical Coalition. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this video belong solely to the speakers and not necessarily to UAP Medical Coalition, its employees, volunteers, or affiliates. All medical references are for informational purposes only. This is not a consultation or therapy session. This content can be triggering for some and is not meant for children. Welcome, Priscilla. Thank you for coming today to talk to me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay. Can you please give everyone a little bit of background about who you are?
Sure. Okay, so you already said that I have a YouTube channel and podcast called Quantum Wytch Cafe. That sort of, was inspired by being somebody that saw something anomalous in the sky at an early age, kindergarten, and ever since then, it seems to have triggered more anomalous events and just a completely different viewpoint of the world. So I started the podcast to talk about these things with people that wanted to talk about them instead of just asking random people in my life, you know, hey, let's talk about UFOs. Nobody wants to talk about that for the most part. So I started the podcast for myself and for others to discuss things in a safe space and also to talk to authors that write books about the topic.
Okay, so could you please briefly explain to the audience about what your UAP encounter or encounters were?
Sure. So briefly, it started in Phoenix, Arizona. I was in kindergarten at the time. I snuck outside to go look at stars because my grandpa had been showing me different constellations. And I sort of just like had this urge to go outside and look for the Orion constellation because that was one that I remembered. And as I'm standing outside, this is late at night, I snuck out. My grandpa was sleeping on the couch, but he was kind of like on and off heavy sleeper. So he didn't wake up when I went outside. I went outside and was looking for Orion. And when I found it, these three lights turned on, kind of like one at a time in a triangle formation. And they were kind of like a self-enclosed like orb, like a pale yellow or gold. And at first I thought it was one craft, but then they started spinning. And then I realized it was three separate crafts. And as they spun clockwise, they went up and they repeated that three times. And then after that, they all lined up in a row and then just like shot off up into the air or into wherever they shot off onto. So super excited about it because I didn't feel scared at the time. I ran inside, and that's when my grandpa did wake up and say, "What are you doing outside?" And he was more concerned with me being outside and getting in trouble for me sneaking past him than he was the whole UFO thing. So I told him I saw spaceships or UFOs, and I didn't really think I knew the term UFO at the time. So he was just like, "Go back to bed before you get in trouble," kind of thing. Um, so I was not afraid. I felt actually really like happy and loved when I was watching them. I had a feeling that they were showing off to me, and I went to school the next day. And being a kid, I didn't realize it was weird yet to talk about that. So I had mentioned it to my priest or my kindergarten teacher, and she told me, pulled me aside and said, "God doesn't make stuff like that, so you need to stop lying." So that was kind of like my first brush with like the stigma with it all, and that led to other experiences with some more scary experiences involving sleep paralysis in different entities, shadow figures, and grays.
Okay. Did you have any physical effects from your experience or experiences?
The first experience with the three orbs was only positive effects. I felt happy and, excited. But when the more harrowing dreams started coming in, experiences and sleep paralysis, I would wake up with like hives all over my body. So that was the most consistent thing that was happening was the hives. And then sort of like waking up in places like either in the backyard or in different areas of the house, but I didn't sleepwalk. I didn't have a history of sleepwalking. So that was strange, and my parents, and family at the time just kind of thought it was I was being a kid having bad dreams. So the waking up kind of feeling sick and covered with hives was the most consistent like physiological thing that happened to me.
Did you ever get a medical history or see a doctor about those issues?
So I did see a doctor about those issues, and they basically chalked it up to allergies. But it would only happen during those times. Like, I didn't have hives all the time. And I was a child. I don't think that I was under enough stress to break out in hives over that. But the fact that, like, I wasn't going to sleep at some points because I was so afraid of another experience happening or another visitation happening that I would literally stay up until I passed out at nighttime. And I didn't understand it at the time, but now I know that's called like hypervigilance. So I think that the effects for me were less like physiological and more emotional or mental, affecting my mental health.
Did you want to talk about some of the mental health aspects?
Yes, I think that was like the more um, that's where it impacted me the most because when you see something like that at an early age, people are automatically going to assume that it's your imagination, and that will follow you into adulthood. So I never really talked about even seeing the lights or seeing the entities to very many people because it was either a joke when I did, or people straight up don't believe you, or they think, or they always say, I believe you believe that you saw that. You must have been watching too much X Files or whatever. Even though a lot of this was before X Files but it's just one of those things where like you don't say, and it makes you so different. You just start questioning what you're told in Catholic school or in church. You just start questioning more. And I think that the big mental health thing that happens is it becomes very isolating because you don't have people to talk to about it.
Did you ever seek therapeutic assistance?
I did not. In high school, these so-called sleep paralysis events were happening more kind of close together. And it was happening to the point where I thought that I was going crazy because of it. And since I was raised Catholic, I thought they were demons. And then when I would see like grays, I would thought the grays maybe were demons because I didn't really, there really wasn't a lot available to me at the time to research. Just kind of like the little things in the library, which was very small. It's a very small collection of things. And I didn't get a hold of Whitley Strieber's book. I didn't really have like a reference for what these things were, but I knew that I was terrified every night. I was waking up with like physical markings. Like if I felt like something was holding me down, I would wake up with like markings or bruises where something was holding me down in the dream, right? Or the sleep paralysis. And then I was waking up just feeling really sick a lot of the times and like hives again. Um, and I was just afraid to go to sleep for such a long time that I did tell my mom I do need to see somebody because I think I'm going crazy because these this happens every night, multiple times a night. And I had woken up, in the backyard one time as a teenager, and I don't sleepwalk. And I was on the other side of the fence. So, like, did I walk out of the house without a history of sleepwalking? So, I think the mental health thing is, you want to talk to somebody, but then imagine the stigma surrounding that right now. If you talk to somebody, they're going to think you're delusional.
Okay. So you never sought assistance from a therapist. And what would you like to have been able to do with a therapist? What kind of treatment would you have liked to have gotten?
I don't know because there's not really therapists that were readily available at the time for my demographic, a child, or a teenager even that specialized in this sort of thing. Like, sure, we had other people doing the work, like famous therapists or John Mack, those people were around, but they weren't necessarily, you don't necessarily even know what's happening to you at the time. So I don't even know what could have been offered. If the world knew about this and this was a normal thing, I think talk therapy would be something that should be offered. And then also some sort of blood work after the experience, because if you're waking up with like hives, that seems like some sort of allergy, then obviously like your immune system may have taken a hit maybe. So I think blood work and talk therapy would have been beneficial. But given the stigma of the field, and it's it's you're afraid to talk to a normal therapist about this sort of thing. Like I barely told my therapist in Kentucky that I had seen ghosts, let alone I had seen other entities that were less easy to explain.
Okay. And what has been helpful for you overall with dealing with your experiences?
Honestly, talking about it to people that aren't judgmental, such as I went on to a podcast and I attended an experiencer group meeting, and those that seems to help when you hear other people talking about the same thing, because then you realize like I didn't tell you these details and you had the same thing happen to you. So I don't you don't even know who these other people are. You've never heard of them and they had the same experience as you, or say something that is exactly what you went through. That really helped, because it makes you feel less alone and it makes you feel less crazy, because there are times that you will question your sanity because of these experiences.
Is there any final statements that you want to make to someone about your experiences or the medical, psychological issues that were involved?
Well, the medical issues at the time didn't seem obvious, but looking back and hearing other people's accounts that have kind of made the connections before me, and comparing my timeline of like medical events, or you know, a lot of people have their menses messed with after these or during these events. That changes for females a lot of times, and that's on a certain timeline. I'd say just take notes. You know, if you're having these experiences, take detailed notes. That way you can compare them later on. And with, because my experiences, like I didn't have anybody like UAP Med or, you know, experiencer group or anybody like that to even compare what was happening to me with, or to talk to other people about with. So I think that's it. I think that I'm only talking about it because I want other people to talk about it. And I don't think it's fair for me to say I'm holding the safe space for you, but I'm not going to talk about what I went through. So just that's it.
Well, thank you so much for coming and being brave enough to share your experiences and to convey that message to people. Would you like to tell people where they can find you?
Sure. You can find me at on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube under at Quantum_Wytch, spelled WYTCH. And that's also the name of my podcast. You can find that on Spotify and Apple and all the streaming, Google, all that stuff. But the easiest way to connect with me is probably through Twitter or Instagram. And that's it.
Thank you again so much for coming and being brave. Like I said, I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who listened.